I'm pretty honored to read a little bit. Laura has a biography of her life here, and she'll talk on that, but I'm a little nervous. I shouldn't be, but I am. She had me dress up this morning, so that's why I look so good. Thank you. So in the book and in her life, Laura always talks about God shots. And at the end of her book, there's a chapter about it and what she sees as God shots. But for I know the plans I have, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. Then you will call upon me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. I will be found by you, declares the Lord, and bring you back from captivity, as Jeremiah 29, verses 11 and 14. Along this journey with Laura, she wrote, her friends have written letters, so she's asked me to read a few of them. The letter I'm going to read now is from her friend Wendy, and while she was doing this book, her and Wendy went to all the places that she'd been. So, dear readers, Laura and I met in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, and after we became friends, we realized our paths could have crossed many years earlier. I had been a police constable in the Skid Row area of Vancouver during the years that Laura lived there with her mum. The poverty, the alcoholism, and addiction in that area are devastating, and anyone who spends time there, either living or working, is deeply affected by the despair. I later spent 20 years trying to protect children from the neglect and abuses Laura suffered as a child. Although our perspectives were different, we nevertheless share an understanding of the darker side of life. Laura and I both became alcoholics. We both found recovery in Alcoholics Anonymous, and we realized a loving God is central to our recoveries. When Laura asked me to accompany her on her journey to visit the people and places that impacted her childhood and her youth, I was honored. What a blessing it has been to witness her encounters with some very difficult memories, as well as with a few people who instilled hope for a better life. On August 27, 2010, we found Sally, the little girl who had been so kind to Laura when she lived on Old Headley Road. Sally knew Laura immediately. Her face broke into a smile as she commented on the eyes that were imprinted in her memories of some 40 years earlier. As we settled around the kitchen table for what turned out to be a lengthy, heartwarming reunion, Sally said, "Laura, you were the sweetest little girl." Those words have stayed with me in return every time I try to find the words to describe the journey I'm sharing with Laura today. Why is sweet such a perfect description, not only of the little girl Sally remembers, but also of the woman Laura is today? Well, she's pleasant, kind, gracious, and delightful. A very genuine, innocent love emanates from her being. She has an angelic demeanor and appearance. It is her history that makes these qualities extraordinary. Laura was born to a single mom who was already deeply entrenched in severe alcoholism and addiction, and as a result, Laura experienced every form of abuse and neglect possible. Basic food and clothing were not provided, and she never lived anywhere long enough to make friends. Her buck teeth often made her the victim of cruel teasing and rejection. She never attended school on a regular basis, so she entered adulthood with less than a basic education. She could not read or write anything beyond three-letter words. She quite predictably sought refuge in drugs, alcohol, and men, as her mother had done. Her nativity and vulnerability attracted many vulturous characters who further victimized her. Somehow she survived it all, clinging to a belief that there was a better life available. The kind people who treated Laura with love and compassion touched her heart and illuminated her darkest moments with hope. And I believe God was working through those people. The most profound observation I've made is that Laura's witness lies in the amazing power of love, and Laura's story exemplifies that power. She's not bitter, resentful, or angry. She's filled with love, gratitude, and kindness. And she's a really sweet lady. Love from your friend Wendy. So I'll let my beautiful partner tell her story. Thanks.
I'm really grateful to be here with everybody. You guys are really amazing. First of all, I just want to say that as soon as I walked into this church, I felt like I was at home. And that really is part of the reason why I want to share my story with you. I was asked very kindly from one of my good friends over there. He's the tallest one. Anyway, and it has been quite the journey. But what's really important to me when I share my story is because that's not the person that I am today, and it's because of people like you that make that way, because I couldn't do it by myself, and I really believe that God puts people in our path for a reason, right? And you don't know what that reason might be, and you don't even know if you can touch somebody with what you're talking about or what you do for them, but it makes all the difference. Sometimes, like in the program when we share, it's like if you say something, it might resonate to somebody else, and you are actually saving a life just from that alone, right? And I don't know if anybody really knows AA very well, but we are very focused on our higher power. For me, that's God. But for a lot of people, they have to make those choices. But usually afterwards, when they start being around for a while and you see miracles start happening in front of your eyes, then it's like they come to know Jesus, right? When I first started out with this thing, I didn't know Jesus. I knew God, what I thought God was, but I didn't know Jesus. And I was called, I don't know if anybody's ever watched that show, 100 Huntley Street. They had gotten in touch with me and asked me if I would come and share and tell people about Jesus. And I didn't even realize that you can actually talk about, you know, how you come to know him and have the relationship. But the pressure of it was that you can bring people to him. Well, I got to tell you the truth about that. When they called on us to come, Debbie is the one that actually wrote my story, so she came with me. They didn't tell me what they were going to ask. And at that point, when they asked me, because that's what they wanted to hear was, how did I find Jesus? Or when I found Jesus, I really didn't know what to say, because I didn't understand that meaning of what Jesus meant, right? I only knew God. And then when in the back of the book, it'll explain a bit more, but I was kind of embarrassed at first because I wasn't sure how to say it, and I only had 8 minutes. They don't give you much time to share on those things, because then they go to the next person, right? And then I said afterwards in the 8 minutes, I said it wasn't me finding Jesus, it was Jesus finding me. And because of you guys in this church and another church that I used to go to and the people that I have in my life today that helps me to be closer to him and to understand what he really means, I wouldn't have known. And I was embarrassed because they put pressure on you, right? And it's not that I'm trying to say it's a bad thing, because it's not. I mean, you know, you watch the show, you can see things with some of the people's stories that they share. But it's different now because I know him. And that little girl that lived downtown on the east side with an alcoholic, drug addict mom, well, he touched me right away, because when I wandered around those streets, I went right to the churches. I don't know why. Nobody talked about Jesus or God. I just had a good, comfortable, warm feel about going there. I felt safe. People were nice there. And I just knew that I was in a safe place, right? And then down there, I stayed in one room, and they had one bathroom, and everybody shared, because it was on a bathroom every floor, right? So they all shared that one bathroom. So, but it was okay, because I spent most of my time out wandering around. And you know what? I felt safe out there, because I could hear the bells. You know the bells from the church? They do the Westminster chimes downtown in Vancouver. Well, right off the bat, I just felt like such a warm feeling, but I didn't understand any of this at the time. until I got better and better. And I say that because through all of my experiences, the one thing that I realized is that there was something always watching over me. And when I went back to the places that I went with my friend Wendy, which is also a God shot because she was down there before being a police officer, and she loves the Lord too. And I always jump to one thing to another because I don't want to forget how grateful I am for the people that have impacted my life, right? She did the things that they did for children that weren't in a good way, like in a good, they weren't looked after properly, right? So she would take the kids and make sure that they were placed in a good home. When I was 12 years old, that's what happened. They finally decided that at that point it was time for me to leave because it wasn't doing any good. It wasn't going anywhere. I was in need of a family, food, all of those basic things that kids really need. But I kind of lose track of thought for a minute because I get nervous. Sorry, guys. Lots of things happen, but I somehow, God saved me from a lot of it. And he was able to know when I needed him the most. And even if it's just a person that just comes into your life and gives you a little bit of food, I never forget those people. I don't know them. They didn't know me. It was just this little girl that was hungry, right? And that one thing was so important because it made me happy. It made me excited about the fact that someone cared. And, I also talk about the pigeons downtown on the east side because they were my bestest friends. I still love them today, believe it or not. But they listened to me when I talked, right? They heard this little girl share her story about whatever it might be. And I just felt like I was one of them. So that was kind of neat because I share that a lot in my AA too. And it's interesting because when AA first started, the people, they used to get, he's praising the Lord. Yeah. Okay, pigeons. We're back at the pigeons. Oh yeah. So what happened is that they told me in AA that at the beginning of when they first started this program to help people with addictions, they said that they used to have they still have sponsors and sponsees, and they would call the sponsees pigeons. So it kind of almost came to a full circle. I was kind of like, oh, no wonder I'm here. Like here's where I'm supposed to be. That's God shot, right? And it's interesting too because I started downtown Vancouver and I had to follow my mom to different places because she would meet a guy and then the guy would tell her to come and and then so I'd go with her. We ended up in Penticton as a little girl. We ended up in Princeton on the old Headley Road. And there was this, I'm going to tell you this other God shot that's really cool. On the old Headley Road, there was a family across the street there. And he was, they call him Grandpa Coyne. And I don't know if you know Princeton very well, but it wouldn't be his nephew. Who would it be? His grandson? Great-grandpa, right? Anyway, he's the mayor of Princeton. And my mom and I lived there because she chased this fellow. Well, this fellow disappeared, but my mom was still into the drugs and all that kind of stuff. But what I remember about him is, and what I found out about him, is that he tried to help my mom. And later on, when I met Sally again, which was his granddaughter, she wasn't able to get the help that she needed. But he was so kind to me. Him and his wife were so wonderful to me. And I never forget him. I actually have a picture of him. And it turned out later on when I saw Sally again, because she would want to be my friend, he had 25 years of sobriety. And, you know, he might not have been able to help my mom, but in the long scheme of it, it kind of came back to me, right? And you know, that's a God shot. He just, like, I always seem to want to gravitate to the people that I could feel the love from. And, you know, maybe some of them not so healthy, not so, like, I don't know some of the words, and I'm sorry if I can't say them right, but they're not always nice people, let's put it that way. But because they said they were, because they said that they love me, because they said, you know, I want to help you, or whatever the timing or the case may be, I was so naive that I would just go with it, right? Whatever it was. Well, you know, God intercepted on a lot of those things too. Because, you know, he saved my life in so many ways, right? Even in the foster care system, you know, there was a couple of not so good places that I had to be at, but there was also one or two that were really good. And the one thing I know for sure is that when I started to meet other people or kids, I didn't know how to relate to them because all I had was my pigeons, right? So it took me a long time to be able to even talk because it was so hard and scary. So Grandpa Coyne's granddaughter, she took me under her wing, and she was really, really sweet to me. And she's still living in Princeton. Like, you know, we drive by and we wave to her, and I see her once in a while, and we talk about, you know, when I was little, because she's 3 years older than me. And yeah, like, you know, when I share my story, I mean, I could tell you lots of ugly things that have happened. I mean, these books are what is the whole story. But what I try to focus on is the positive in my life today. I don't like to look at the darkness. It's not that I forget it, because I use it in a positive way. When I go into meetings and I share about my story, I try to share positive things, that you do not have to be that person that you were. I didn't know anything different because I was taught not so good stuff. So I follow in that, right? And those certain people that come into your life and they do something unimaginably beautiful, and you're not even knowing, of course, right? That's the God thing. That makes you feel that you want more of that, and that you're actually worthy of having something good and feeling happy and good and confident about yourself. But a lot of times, especially nowadays, it's a lot worse because, you know, a lot of children, they don't have good role models. Good parents that really want to make sure that they're on the right track, or how to teach them right from wrong. So I was really fortunate because I wanted that. I want to know what's right. And sometimes I have to ask, even my hubby over here, because I try to, you know, I might read something and I get stuck on a word, and he's like, spell it. And then, of course, he'll spell it for me, and then it kind of makes sense in that whole sentence, right? And when you're not a reader, if you don't know how to read, and you learn a word that actually fits in a sentence, it's like, yes, it's opening up a window, right? It's just like, I get so excited. It was, you know, like, it's just those little things that make it so much more worth my life today. I have 4 kids. I love my kids so much. And if I could say anything about it, those kids are like everything to me when I see them. Even my grandkids, when I see them, I melt. I just want to run up. I'm more like a kid than I am a mom and a grandma in some ways, because I get so excited about just wanting to love on them. Because that's all I ever wanted, was just someone to say, you know, I love you and I want you to be a part of our lives. You know, you get to a point where you want to feel that security, and when you get that love, you want to keep it. Because I say that, you know, sometimes when you walk on the streets and you see a lot of people that are homeless and a lot of people that are not in a good way, you know, they all have a story. I mean, we don't really know what that story looks like. I always try to be kind and gentle and also careful, because the way it is now with the drugs and everything, we have to keep ourselves safe and try and navigate what's good to do something good for somebody, and then be careful of the people that aren't about, you know, kindness, right? I'm sorry if I'm all over the place, because I just sometimes don't make a lot of sense, I know. You know, there was a time where I couldn't even be around just normal people. I felt like I only could stay around with alcoholics because we had stuff in common, right? But now, I can be around normal people and feel like I'm like one of us, one of you, right? And that takes a lot. But now it's like normal. I just want to be around you guys more. I want to get back to my kids just for a second. My church that I used to go to in Greendale, Mennonite, that's in Greendale there. And when I went into that church, I heard a rooster crow. I called it my farm church. And I'd go up, the first thing they said, come on up, you know, share a little bit about something. Can't remember what because the books just came out, and one of the people there that are very dear to me that has just passed, Rusty Reimer, he was so encouraged by this story that he wanted to be able to buy a whole bunch of these books and give them downtown to the east side. Like, I didn't have a lot of money or anything, so I said, I was quite surprised actually. But he did. He bought all these beautiful books, and then we went down and we handed them out to the places that we thought might need them, or give them a little hope, because really that's what it's about, right? And these people at this church, is the first time I went into a church that actually there was the same kind of idea as this one. That's probably why I like this one so much. People gathered around. They read my story. They didn't judge me. They didn't say, you know, oh, you don't belong here, or blah, blah, blah. You know, everybody's got a kind of a different opinion about it, but they wrapped their arms around me. They knew that I didn't have food. They knew that I struggled because I didn't have certain things that you should normally have. It didn't have to be any riches. It's never about stuff. It's just about, you know, just the love of people and a roof over your head where you feel like you got a little home to just feel comfortable in. And they would come into my house, they'd open my fridge, they'd open my cupboards. They would just, you know, take me out for lunch after church. They'd give me money to put in the basket because I didn't have that kind of monies, right? And then one day, my daughter had to run away from her husband at the time because he was very violent, and he had hurt her, and she needed to kind of escape, you know, not to say where she was going. And she came out to Chilliwack, where I was. And I just had this little apartment, but she stayed with me. And then I asked the church, I said, you know what? My daughter needs a little bit of furniture. And, you know, she's really struggling. She didn't take anything, right? So she just kind of left without taking anything. She just wanted to get out and be safe. That church, they announced it. I don't know how many people, maybe 2,500 in that church. Anyway, they announced it. And all of a sudden, people showed up at this apartment, got the apartment. They showed up in trucks. And she had the 2 little boys, and they brought a whole thing of furniture. They had groceries. That apartment was full of love, of God, right? Of Jesus. I mean, it's just incredible. I mean, I couldn't believe that they would do such a thing. It blew me away. And I had to do a little job. I was looking after some animals, so I wasn't even there at that moment. But Amanda called me up right away, and she said, "Mom, you would not believe it." I said, What? People are here. I don't even know them. And they showed up with furniture, and they showed up with food, and we have bunk beds for the boys, and we have clothes in the closet and the drawers, and we got drawers to put the clothes in. And it was just like, she couldn't believe what people did to bring, all of that together for her and the 2 boys. She had her first son when she was 17 years old, Matthias. He passed from brain cancer when he was 3. And I'm so grateful that I was sober for at least 5 years at that time, because I got to go there every day with her and encourage her and love on her and try to let her know that I didn't want her to blame God for what was happening with Matthias. Because I didn't want them to turn their back on him. Because my 4 kids, they know God, and they know I love Jesus, because I know I'm going like this all the time. And I love my Jesus music. I've got the thing blasting. I want other people to hear too. Roll down the windows, please. But, she still loves that. She still loves God. It's just really amazing, because I can talk to her about him and about, we even sing songs together. And, it's just... And Matthias, I have to tell you about Matthias. Did you know that his name is referred to as one of God's disciples to help alcoholics? And I was like, no. And she says, Amanda told me this. And I was like, isn't that something? I walked along a path. When I used to walk my dogs, my dogs are one of the most important things. I used to call them my spiritual pups. And I'd walk with my pups all the time. I talked to God constantly. Anybody ever have animals? There's something about that. It's like they're listening to you. Unconditional love. And I wrote a letter, and I tied it on a bench. And it was a letter to a young man that had passed, that his family kept bringing little things and putting it on that bench that you said, how they have that little things on the benches? Wow, isn't that ever cool, right? And I sat on that bench and I looked at it, and it was a 17-year-old boy that had died in a motorbike accident. But I could tell his family loved him, because they were always putting something on the bench. And I thought, I wonder if I wrote them a letter, tied it on the bench, and asked them if it was all right with them, if they could if it's all right with them for their son to look after Matthias in heaven. Because I really felt better knowing that he was going to be in good hands with this young man. So I wrote the letter, tied it on in a Ziploc. Then I did my walks as I always did every day. And then 2 weeks later, I just kind of figured, they didn't get the letter or whatever. Because the letter, when I went by that last time, there was nothing in that Ziploc. So I thought, I better take that Ziploc off of that bench. Well, do you think I could get that thing off the bench? No way. And of course, I didn't have scissors or anything, but I had tied it with a purple shoe. Thank you. Anyway, okay, so I just thought, okay, we'll just leave it. And then I go home, and then I come back the next day. And then I saw this letter in this bag. I was like, wow, I could see my name, Laura, on there, right? And I was like, I dropped my knees. I was like, oh my God, I got to get this letter. So I pull this letter out and I open it up and they just said, that my son would be honored to look after your grandson. Isn't that something when you think about it? Because it's not just down here, but it's up there too. You know, we got people that we love that are up there. And I just know in my heart that I think, thank God we love the Lord so much. Because we get to know that they're up there and they're like, apparently he skied. He's teaching Matthias how to ski up there. I even think they might even have AA meetings up there. You never know, right? But I'm so proud that I can be sober today from my grandson, right? I'm proud that I can be sober for all of my kids because it was not easy being a single parent to 4 kids. You know how they get when they're teenagers? Well, some of you do anyway. It'll come. It's so difficult, but it's worth it. Absolutely worth it. So Lauren's going to read a couple more little things here. I mean, I could have gone on and on and on about the God shots. Money from the fountain downtown Vancouver, right on Georgia there. When I was a kid, I'd go in there with my bare feet and pick out all the money, and I was like in my glories, right? Go to the Hudson Bay and get some blow-up little toys so I could lock myself in that bathroom for 3 hours and just be in the water and just, make like they're real. All this stuff that just makes you feel better as like a little girl, right? But truthfully, the people that did these books for me also are amazing. And they all love the Lord. They love Jesus. And they taught me so much. I can't even begin to tell you. But, one thing I know for sure is there's always hope. Always hope. I felt really bad about sharing today because of what's happened in that place, Tumbler Ridge. But I also know that at the end of that, and when all of those people come together, there's always something really wonderful that comes out of something really bad. And this is something that, you get to make a choice in a sense of, if you don't like the way that you're living, you don't have to live that way. Because there's people like us in this church that are willing to hold our hand out and feed people. Boy, oh boy, those are delicious, by the way, whoever cooks all this yummy stuff. But it's those kinds of things that bring people together. And it's really amazing. So, do you mind coming up and having a couple more words coming out your mouth?
Yeah, sure.
He's another God shot, by the way. Real quickly, I'll try and be real quick because I know I'm taking up too much time here, but him and I met at bowling. I betted him $5 that I could beat him. I always make sure that I get my $5 before I leave because it's important to know that I'm better bowler than he is. Anyway, he slipped me a note. Is that making funny noises? Okay. He slipped me a note and he said, if you would like to go for coffee, give me a call. And I thought to myself, well, it's the last thing I need is a man in my life. I got God. Anyway, we actually got together and we found out that we have so many similar things, which is really interesting because I call that God shots too. Like, he really wanted to find God again. I can't speak for you completely. Right. He really wanted to find God again. He lost his partner and, he kind of lost his way. And I was at a place where I felt like I could be, there for him. And then when we found out stories that we have 4 kids and they're the same ages and our birthdays are on the same day and I was going to move into the same house that him and his wife were living. I could go on and on, like God shot after God shot after God shot. Well, I tell you, you've been sober 2 years now, and you're loving the Lord like you've never loved him before.
Amen.
Yeah, and I'm so proud of him. He's really cute. Oh, sorry, I said that out loud. It's really funny, too, because I just never had a nicer person be so good to me as he has. And I've been married a couple times. And, you know, sometimes they don't work out because that's not the person who I really wanted to be at that time. And that person that I was with wasn't necessarily healthy for me. But I'm always grateful because I've got 4 beautiful children that I wouldn't have, right? But now I have a special man in my life. He treats me so good. You could see my phone. There's all these beautiful little poems on there and the love hearts and all of these things saying.
No, you can't see my phone.
But I mean, to experience that at this age, at this time of my life, if God isn't good. So I just want to say thank you so much for welcoming me in your church. And you guys are amazing to me. And, you know, I love my charcuterie board. I can actually say the word now. I love it. I mean, I just love the way everybody is just so kind. And I appreciate that. It makes a difference in my life for sure.
Laura's such a hard story to follow, and her story's amazing. So, and my God shot is with Laura in my life. You know, when my partner passed over COVID, it took a couple of years, but she was 15 years older than I was, and we were together 21 and a half years. So when she did pass, there were medical issues that would have been really hard in my life and her life. And I was quite a wreck, and I was drinking actually too much, and I knew that, and I was asking God for help in my life because I couldn't stop myself. And then Laura came into my life, and every day is beautiful, and every day is a blessing. And I love you very much. Thank you. So there's a letter in here from Sally Coyne, who when she and Wendy were trying to find Sally, they found Sally, and it had been 40 years since they'd seen each other. So I'll just read this part. Memories from Sally Coyne. Sally was a little girl who Laura loved and played with when she lived in Penticton on the old Headley Road. So this is from Sally. I remember her eyes like it was yesterday. There was no hope in her eyes. I was young, but I knew that look. I had seen hopelessness in people before, and I recognized it in Laura. Her little face was drawn down, and it seemed like she'd given up before she'd even started to live. She was skinny and had long, straight, unkempt hair, and often she wore her mother's clothes and shoes, and the clothes did not fit her. I remember her mother's face, and everything about her mother was dark eyes, dark hair, white skin. She was the first drug-addicted person I knew. I wasn't afraid of her, but I didn't like her. I remember how important it was for me to tell Laura her mom was not sad and sick because of her, she was just sad and sick. I would take Laura away from her mother whenever I could, just to give her a break. Outside was a fun place for me. I spent most of each day outside, so that's where I took Laura. There was nothing bad out there. Nothing smelled bad, nothing looked bad or felt bad. There was just us being 2 little girls. I could show her things and make her laugh, and quickly learned how easy it was to make her smile. And when Laura smiled, her eyes lit up and she was completely different. You know, sometimes when you're with someone who has been oppressed and depressed for such a long time, that when they laugh, it's like it almost hurts them instead of making them feel good. And sometimes they even cry. That's what it was like with Laura. It was as if all of her emotions were in one bucket, and she didn't know which one to let out. When you got her running and playing and she went to laugh, she might cry or she might yell. But after a while, she would just giggle like every other kid. Stub was my grandpa's dog, and he wasn't a nice dog. He was a blue heeler, mostly light gray with white and a bit of black. He bit everyone on the farm but me. That's because I never trusted him. He would sneak up behind people in the grass or in the ditch and bite the backs of their legs, sometimes so badly that person would need stitches. But he never did that with Laura. And I told Laura not to trust him, but Laura did. She used to sit on her steps face to face with him and pet him and talk to him. About what, I have no idea, but he followed her around like he was her puppy, and she loved him. I think if he would have had the opportunity, he would have ripped the guy apart who lived with Laura's mom. I always got Laura to sit with me on the school bus because the kids would be mean to her if she didn't. And once we got to school, we went in different directions because of our ages. But when we landed up in the schoolyard during recess, I would see her alone, watching the other kids playing, so I'd go over and we'd play together. I gave Laura my coat because that was mostly what the other kids would see every day. I gave her my shoes also. They didn't really fit her. They were much better than her mother's shoes that she used to wear to school. On top of that, she had buck teeth, and the kids always picked on anyone with bad teeth. She used to stay home from school a lot, and when I got off the bus, I would go to her house. I wanted to see she was still alive. When she came to the door, she would say her mom was asleep, and she couldn't wake her, and she didn't want to leave her for fear she might die or be dead already. She had the sweetest little heart. I still see her sweetheart, and it's amazing that it's still sweet. When she came to see me, she told me she was a mother, and a pretty good one, which didn't surprise me because she's always had a great ability to love. I have shared my hope with many people over the years, but when Laura came to see me this year after 40 years, and I got to see that she's well, and she has hope, I was so encouraged. She shared her story about the God shots in her life and her choice to live a sober life. She was able to share the same hope with me that I had shared with her years ago, and I don't think she really knew how much she affected me. I was not in a place in life where I had no hope, but I've never had my faith more encouraged than when she shared a story with me. Hope imparts strength for the day. Hope for the day can grow into faith, and faith can blossom into believing. And I told Laura it is time for her to open her heart and receive the blessing that was first intended for her because it was meant for good. And I believe Psalm 40 is part of Laura's story. I've read this book a dozen times. I still get feelings about it. He brought me up out of the pit of destruction, out of the miry clay, and he set my feet upon a rock, making my footsteps firm. That's Psalm 40. And the result of Laura's story is, and he put a new song in my mouth, a song of praise to our God. Many will see and fear and will trust in the Lord. And that's from Sally. And when we drive on the old Headley Road today, that house is still standing that Laura lived in. And Sally's is out by the rodeo grounds. There's one more that Laura would like me to read. It's about Wendy, who wrote the book. Or Debbie, I'm sorry. It's about Debbie. It was on the back of the book, Debbie Madigan. Another God shot is she grew up in Dawson Creek, and I was born and raised in Dawson Creek, and my parents knew her parents. And her husband's from Fort St. John, and I've got my 2 kids and 2 grandkids living in Fort St. John. And I work there, so it's the God shots happen every day. So this is from Debbie. Dear Laura, what a privilege and honor it has been to write your story. It took great courage for you to open yourself up and share your story with such honesty. We spent many hours together with you remembering and me writing, and sometimes the memories were so awful that we cried together, and other times we would get the giggles because life can be so unexpectedly funny. I believe your story will touch many lives because it is a story of redemption and hope. It is a story that shows how people can come from the ugliest places and become something beautiful. When we hold on to the hand of our God and allow him to lead us, he gives us the power to become the person he intended us to be, renewing our lives with hope and meaning. Thank you for allowing me to get to know you over this past year, Laura. You've taught me a great deal, and I love you as a sister. And that's from Debbie. So it's Laura's got, she had this book done for little children to understand her story. So there's pigeons in there and pictures of her buck teeth, and it's pretty awesome. And this book is called A Little Girl Called Squeaks. It's a story of hope and the biography of Laura by Debbie Madigan. And I'm thankful that God put her in my life, and I love this little girl.